Topbed Talk.
I'm James Hernan, a surgeon from Norwich. I have the great pleasure to co-host the last session with Professor Carley from Canada. And our first speaker is Gerrit Slotter, a surgical oncologist from the Maximal Medical Center in the Netherlands. And when I was reading your profile last night, I had a great degree of surgical inadequacy. You do colorectal surgery, liver surgery, adrenal surgery, and hernia surgery. I just manage colorectal, only a small amount. And you find the time to fit it in around all your other roles in terms of co-organizing the last World Congress last year. You run the prehab study, an international randomized controlled trial, and you train everyone else how to do prehabilitation. They come to your center to watch. So I'm very impressed with everything you do. But before you start, I thought we'd get a good idea to work out how many people do think that we should wait and improve patients' fitness before surgery, or should we just get on and do surgery? I know it's a very biased field, but how many people think we should delay surgery to get people as fit as they possibly can? It's about half, 2/3. So you haven't got a complete. Yeah. So you haven't got a completely biased field. So thank you very much. Really looking forward to your talk.
Well, thank you for your kind words of introduction. Well, to come back to the question, can we delay surgery? In the end, I will say yes, we can, because we can delay surgery. We'll come back to that. The Dutch Cancer Society is supporting our trial, as well as the National Fund Against Cancer. I'm very grateful for the companies Johnson & Johnson and Friesland Campina, because they make the trial possible. Friesland is delivering the protein, and Johnson & Johnson is covering the loose ends. We make a diagnosis of colorectal cancer, and then we need surgery. And in between, there's about 5 weeks, and these 5 weeks, and I've seen the window before, is the window of opportunity to train our patients to get in better condition. We do so in our trial, but also in the hospital in a period of 4 weeks. We do training, nutrition, cessation of smoking, and mental support, like actually any other protocol that I've seen here during the last 2 days. If you are in a control group, in a non-randomized pilot, there was 40% of the patients that recovered fully, that got back to the 6-minute walk test they had before they started, they were enrolled because they didn't train. But the patients that did get trained, and Stefan already showed that 86% of them was fully recovered, or even in a better condition. And this means a lot to a patient, because the patient will have a better quality of life, will probably be shorter in the hospital. And even if the patient is fit, he will be open to get additional treatment like chemotherapy. So there are probably more patients that start chemotherapy and more people that will have the complete cycle of chemotherapy. So we might actually add something to survival. But this was a non-randomized fashion, and we find results, and during the last 2 days I've heard results similar to this. And why haven't we done so 20 years ago? Because the business case, cost. There's a problem with cost, and Stefan tried to come into details, but calculating cost is a hard thing. The most important thing is, even if you have a positive business case within your hospital, there's different managers in the hospital that have different budgets. So the cost for physical therapy, dietitians, and so on will be somewhere else in the hospital, and the potential benefits will be somewhere else. So even if you have a positive business case, the organization will still not support you if there's not enough evidence. And then there's the other aspect that I'm supposed to discuss is a delay of surgery. What does it mean? Is outcome worse after with a certain delay? I was talking about the interval, the window of opportunity that we take about 5 weeks for. If you do not do prehabilitate, people still need to go to the endoscopist, in our hospital at least, to get the results of pathology and so on. They need to go to the surgeon, to the case manager, to the anesthesiologist, and maybe even to the cardiologist or the pulmonologist to be prepared for surgery. And then surgery has to be scheduled. And all in all, this takes also about 4 weeks. This is the scheme of our international trial, and prehabilitation lasts 4 weeks. But before we can start training, we have to do measurements. And after training, we do measurements again. So 4 weeks is not even reachable. This is what I just asked from our case managers. Could you look up the patients, the interval that we made between the diagnosis, the multidisciplinary meeting, and surgery for patients that got into the prehab trial, and at least that got prehabilitated, and patients that didn't get prehabilitated because they were not suitable for the study. The first what I want you to see is that it's actually only 11 out of 51 patients that enrolled and got prehabilitation. There's a lot of patients that do not participate in the study because they cannot come to the hospital 3 times per week and so on. And fortunately, we thought in our trial that this was awkward, but I've seen a number of other trials here where inclusion rates are also low. But why I want to demonstrate this is that the patients that got prehabilitated were operated 5.8 weeks after the multidisciplinary team meeting. And the patients that did not get trained, they were operated 4.8 weeks after the MDT. So the difference is only 1 week, is at least 1 week. This is why we want to operate early. If in a bowel, a small polyp might develop, and this small polyp can easily be removed by the endoscopist. So the polyp will never turn into a cancer. The thing is, if you leave a polyp, there's a potential that the polyp will enlarge, will elevate, and will eventually turn into malignancy. And somewhere along the line, the dotted line, there's a risk of invasion, so a risk of dissemination. But the thing is, the whole trajectory lasts 12 to 15 years. So we're talking, just to compare, there's 1 week of delay of surgery, or maybe 2 weeks of delay of surgery, but there's a natural biology that lasts about 12 to 15 years. So I just want to point out the respect, or the relevance. Then there's another thing. As a surgeon, you see your patients in the outpatient clinic, and actually every patient comes with a similar story. They said, "Well, I have had complaints longer, and I went to my GP, and my GP didn't refer me for my initial complaints." So they blame their doctor. And I think they should not blame their doctor, because not every patient that comes to the GP will have a tumor. I know all patients that I see will have a tumor, because that's why they are referred to me. And the other thing is that patients will have had their complaints even before they go to the doctor. And what I definitely don't want them to do is blame themselves for being late. But there definitely is a patient's delay and there is a doctor's delay. And there's some literature on that from Spain, 2 articles. There is a considerate patient's delay, and 1 out of 8 patients has a delay over half a year. Between symptoms and treatment, there was 128 days in a cohort in Spain, and women had a longer interval than men had. And another study from the Netherlands, between symptoms and treatment, 138 days. And with these tumors, there was no difference in stage, so all stages had the same interval. So what we can do as doctors is take care of our patients well as soon as they enter the hospital. And this used to be our referral pattern, or at least the beginning of our pathway. Patient would be referred by a general practitioner, would be sent either to the surgeon, the endoscopist, or the internal medicine. And then the surgeon, or we all would refer patients to endoscopy for an endoscopy, and then the endoscopist would refer the patient back to the surgeon for the pathology and for the result of the endoscopy. Then the surgeon decided we needed radiology, drawing of lab, After these results, the patient would go back to the surgeon, and then finally we would refer the patient to the MDT meeting and discuss the indication for operation. And then this would take about, if you add this up, a week, it's at least 4 weeks. And usually it was actually longer. And then what happened, we had to rush into surgery because we wanted to operate all these patients within 6 weeks. So in 2 weeks' time, you had to see the patient and schedule surgery, resulting in an uncomfortable situation for everyone who's scheduling this, but also that you probably would not operate your own patient. You might be operating someone else's patient on Tuesday, and he would be operating your patient because it wasn't easy to schedule. We changed the pathway, and we said, well, why would these patients be referred to surgeons or internal medicine? Why not refer to the endoscopist? Because the endoscopist every patient needs endoscopy, and we'll cut out 2 weeks of waiting time. So the patients will go to the endoscopist, and the endoscopist, and I heard that before, in 95%, the endoscopist can predict that a patient will need surgery. So the endoscopist will immediately order radiology, lab, will include a case manager to the patient, so the case manager can team up with the patient from day one. But the thing is, the process is speeded up in this fashion. And instead of taking 4 weeks, we now take 1.5 weeks. And then we come again to the window of opportunity. So by speeding up your workup, you can create time to prepare your patient. And I told you already about scheduling surgery. If you do 250 operations colorectal a year, you can make reservations for slots. You already know that patient 137 will be operated in August, so why not make a reservation for slots? So straight after the multidisciplinary team meeting, you can schedule surgery a few weeks ahead to allow prehabilitation. So you schedule surgery, the same surgeon will be there at the outpatient clinic, and we combine this. The case manager will do all the dirty work and do all the explanation, and as a surgeon you meet your patient and you will refer them to anesthesiology. What we also did is we gave anesthesiology more time to take care of our patients. But then we're talking about an interval and waiting time and delay. But what is the actual delay? Because that's different over countries. Some speak of delay between referral by the general practitioner to surgery, others between endoscopy or maybe pathology to surgery, and others the multidisciplinary team meeting and surgery. And I think the latter one is the last one is probably the one that is the most similar in different situations. This is the waiting time that the government or organizations allow us to have the top line is Holland. It's 5 or 6 weeks. Governmental organizations allow us 6 weeks to do surgery, but our own surgical society has determined this should be 5 weeks or less. And then in Denmark, they have another situation. They really had to speed up surgery in all kinds of oncological surgery. So for the workup, they would have 2 weeks, but then you would have to operate within 2 weeks after. That was their action to improve oncological outcome, but it's the question whether that stands true. For China, I heard it's 1 week, so that means that everything has to be done hasty. And this is the situation in the UK, 9 weeks. This is the 62 days that I heard before for the workup, and between MDT and surgery, you're allowed to take 32 days. But there's a difference among countries, and I wonder what they're based on, because they're not based on literature. So rather, instead of taking action in the waiting times between the MDT and surgery, you focus on the workup. And that's what we did in our hospital, and together with Johnson & Johnson Company, we completely wrote down our protocol, our colorectal pathway, starting on the left with the referral from the general practitioner, and completely at the end, 5 years after follow-up. And I already told you, we connect the case manager to the patient on day one, and she, in this case, three ladies, they will stay with the patient until 5 years of follow-up, so they'll stay connected all along. But what we also did is we checked all our patient information leaflets. We checked all our protocols for our staff, and we translated them into English, so they are available actually to everyone. And in there's the 4 weeks of pre-rehabilitation, but because we have written this down, we could also make changes. And the most important change is management change, and that's what we use this information for, to create management change. The major thing we do is we brought together all disciplines and created a team. So what we now do, we receive teams from abroad, multidisciplinary teams, and with our multidisciplinary teams, we teach other teams how to start working together and take initiatives to create a change in the hospital. And that all because we implemented the new pathway and prehabilitation and had favorable results. Is there any literature on the delay? Because I was supposed to talk about delay. Yes, there is. And this is an article from Denmark, from Ismail Gögene. And they are part of our consortium, the team that is doing the international prehabilitation trial. And they wrote whether we could delay surgery to get patients in better shape. And this is what they found. They withdrew about 2,000 articles, but they came down to 5 randomized trials that gave information on outcome and delay of surgery. And when we talk about overall survival, there were 4 studies that showed no difference. But there was only 1 study that showed a little difference, but it had nothing to do with the disease, and it was clinically non-significant. Considering the disease, which is actually far more important, whether you stay disease-free, there was no difference and no association between the delay in surgery or at least waiting time in 3 studies, so there's no true association. With that information and information from 2 other articles, they stated that a delay of 56 to 62 days should not be detrimental for the patient with respect to long-term outcomes. And this is really moderately explained. This means that an acceptable waiting time between the diagnosis and surgery could be actually 8 weeks. And what all can you do in 8 weeks? You can do a lot, but at least you can provide 4 weeks of prehabilitation, I think. So to come to a conclusion, prehabilitation improves outcome. There must be a positive business case. If you invest, there will be money, a gain of money in the end, but it's hard to calculate. The actual delay, at least in our hospital, was 1 week, but let's count 1 or 2 weeks, and I think if you compare that to the course of development and to the doctors' and patients' delay, you can afford that. We saw that national guidelines, they differ, but they're definitely not based on any literature. And I think there's a lot to be done in colorectal pathways that can be optimized. And I hope you all agree that an acceptable waiting time could be 8 weeks. And we don't have to take 8 weeks, we can take less time. But yes, I think we can delay surgery for prehabilitation. Anyone who objects to that? No more questions, thank you.
Ray Majorison here, thanks for listening to Top Med Talk. Now, before we let you go, it's important that we remind you to subscribe to Top Med Talk. That way you'll never, ever miss another episode. Also, if we could encourage you to join us on social media, Twitter, Facebook, LinkedIn, YouTube, pretty much every single social media platform, we're there. Join us. And finally, check out topmedtalk.com. If you go to our website, you can subscribe to email updates. That way we can always tell you where we're going to be, what we're going to be doing, and how you can join us. topmedtalk.com and click on the section marked email updates. Finally, Top Med Talk is proud to act as the broadcasting arm of EBPOM, Evidence-Based Perioperative Medicine. We'd love you to find out more about them as well. ebpom.org is their website. That's ebpom.org. And if you go to ebpom.org/meetings, you can find out about some of the wonderful meetings that we attend and cover across the year here on Top Med Talk. That's ebpom.org/meetings.